27,000 tons of yuzu are grown here in Japan every year. Compare that to here in the US, where there are only a handful of yuzu farms, growing a fraction of that. The number of yuzu menu items in the US grew 33% between 2016 and 2021, and a French flavour company named yuzu 2025's Flavour of the Year.
I think chefs really love how different it is from a regular lemon or a lime or an orange.
With this kind of supply imbalance, countries will typically strike an international trade deal, but none of Japan's yuzu bounty will reach the US legally. And because there's not much fresh yuzu grown in the US, prices for the fruit have skyrocketed to around $20 a pound. So if Japan has so much yuzu, why can't it meet US demand? And why is American yuzu so expensive?
I have been going to Japan a long time, so I love, the citrus.
Robbie Cook is the executive chef of Koro Omakase in New York City.
I do a smoked salt with the yuzu juice on that. Right now, winter time goes very well with the wild yellowtail, so with cooking it in a broth into the ponzu.
Throughout his career, he's been able to compare Japanese and domestic yuzu.
The ones from Japan have a little more sweetness and that orangey flavor compared to like lemony flavor. The thing that's nice about what you're getting from Japan is they're like really massive, so you get much more surface area. You can peel your own skins, freeze them, and save for a later date.
Right now, the only legal way to experience fresh Japanese yuzu is by leaving the US. Here in Japan, it's everywhere.
柚子を一言で表すと、日本の代表的な香りの一つだと思います。
Senkoji Farms in Kochi Prefecture sells its fresh fruit for as little as 10 cents a pop. In the past, its yuzu has gone for over $3.
柚子は以前はすごく値段がしたこともありました。現在は柚子の栽培面積の増加とともにある程度一定の価格で収まっていると思います。
52% of yuzu grown in Japan comes from the Kochi Prefecture. Hisashi Senkoji took over his family's 10-acre citrus farm when he was 31. Some of the yuzu trees here are more than 100 years old.
家族の歴史って柑橘のこの柚子の古い木の歴史だったり
Only a few fruits will be high enough quality to sell whole, the most expensive form.
外観が大きさ、形、綺麗さ、それで最高の柚子っていうのは作られていきます。現在の規格では完璧な柚子は綺麗な傷は全くない柚子です。
The rest will be juiced and the peels used for essential oils. Senkoji Farms separates the yuzu intended for sale from the yuzu intended for juicing and sorts it by size and quality.
で農家ごとにそれぞれ分けてこのまんま流れていってまずあそこの3人おりますけどそこで手で選別して汚いもの傷がついているもの傷みやすいものそういうものをまずのけます。それから選果機のカメラを通して大きさ外観で選別されます。
One blemish too many can disqualify a fruit from being sold whole.
柚子は柚子のこの成果玉で販売するやつは表傷5まで裏6までなので12345678910なのでこれはすごく綺麗だけどこっち残念もったいないより良い柚子っていうのはやっぱり僕たちは綺麗な柚子って思ってますので綺麗で見た目が綺麗な柚子。
Japan is known for its luxury fruit, which prioritizes a perfect aesthetic above all else. These premium pieces can be sold at a much higher price than the average offering. To keep every fruit as pretty as possible, Sashi and his team of 4 harvest by hand.
収穫では柚子トゲが多いですので皮の手袋を使います。皮の手袋で収穫してまず手を守るように。手を守るにはどうして手を守るかって言ったら皮の手袋でそれで柚子を収穫の時に守るためです。
Sashi says current technology doesn't take the yuzu tree's huge thorns into account, which can damage the fruit, but he has hopes for a more automated future.
ゆくゆくはこの柑橘の収穫っていうのもいずれ先進的なロボットがしてくれるとは思ってます。
About 4 out of Senkoji Farms' 10 acres are dedicated to yuzu. The fruit accounts for 40% of sales, so it's important to keep it as healthy as possible. But the question of why all this yuzu from Japan won't legally make it to the US can be answered in part by this imperfect green piece of fruit.
実際こんな実ばっかりの木がある。これ柑橘トリステザウイルスが入ってる。全然違う。こんなになったらこういう柚子ばっかりできだしたら木を植え替えて他の木にこれが移らないようにしたりします。
But citrus tristeza virus isn't the only threat to America's $3 billion citrus industry. Another infection, citrus greening disease, was first detected in 2005. Since then, citrus production in Florida has plummeted 75%. The disease is incurable. Once a tree is infected, the only way to deal with it is to destroy it. Some markets, like the European Union, do allow yuzu imports from Japan under strict conditions that keep prices sky high. One German sushi restaurant told Business Insider it purchased a case of 12 Japanese yuzu for €7 a piece. The United States, on the other hand, does not allow any imports of fresh yuzu from Japan.
It might be touchy, but I do believe some chefs are getting from Japan.
Records from the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service show only rare instances of smuggled yuzu, the most recent being in 2016. But these records only tell us when smuggled yuzu was found. To start the process of lifting the ban, a trading partner would first have to request market access, something the USDA told BI hasn't happened yet. Fresh yuzu seekers in the States must buy their fruit from one of the few US producers, like the family-run orchard Flavors by Bhumi. But local-grown supply is limited, making it expensive. Flavors by Bhumi sells its yuzu for about $20 a pound, compared to Senkoji Farms' $2.60.
To the best of our knowledge, we are the only growers of the yuzu or yuzu in general in the Northeast. Nobody else does it.
It wasn't a choice to grow it in New Jersey. We live here, so there wasn't anywhere else to grow it.
Since filming with BI, Flavors by Bhumi has moved its East Coast production to Pennsylvania. Seema, Vivek, and their daughter Simran are the family behind the business.
I'm 16 years old, and sometimes one of them says, oh, the yuzu are like our firstborns because they were around before I was. So yes, I have been surrounded by citrus pretty much my whole life.
The Maliks started growing yuzu 20 years ago, but they had to work out some kinks before starting their business in 2017.
We did put a couple of trees in the ground outside. They promptly died.
There was no information available 20 years ago when we first started working with the yuzu. After tinkering around for a good decade, we decided to go commercial and started working with Michelin-starred restaurants and have been doing so for the last 7 years now.
Because the East Coast climate isn't ideal for growing yuzu, a greenhouse was pivotal to the company's success.
We can control the climate, the feeding, the beneficial insects, the nutrition, everything is controlled.
The greenhouse also adds a layer of protection from diseases and pests. At the same time, greenhouse space is Flavors by Bhumi's biggest roadblock to increasing supply.
The access to good greenhouse space is always a challenge because we can't expand without building greenhouses. There's always this challenge to find the right land, the right space to do all this.
Scaling requires more labour from Simran, the farm's resident grafting expert.
We have close to about, I would say, 3,000 to 4,000 trees.
Since yuzu trees grown from seed take about 18 years to start producing fruit, most new yuzu trees, even in Japan, are created through grafting. The process involves attaching a budding yuzu stem to the root system of a different, easier to grow citrus tree.
Essentially, the way a successful graft works is you want the original tree to kind of absorb the graft and then be able to grow that tree going further. You don't want it to continue growing its own self, per se. This is a grafted yuzu tree. This part right here is the original plant, and this is where the graft was done, right here.
This graft was done about 2 years ago, and the tree is already producing fruit. But it will still be a few years before it's fully grown.
These are definitely going to take a bunch of time, somewhere between another 7 to 8 years to get somewhere along that size, or maybe even along this size.
Growing enough fruit is one thing, but providing quality fruit is another. Fresh yuzu does not have a very long shelf life.
A couple of weeks at best when it's fully ripe, because it tends to lose its juice content and tends to start becoming drier in nature.
So even if they could import it, many chefs would still pay a premium for domestic yuzu, especially when it's grown right next door.
I source locally, like they tend to be much fresher here, from travel time. Vivek's just such a great guy, like I would rather support him and then always use his citrus, which is great.
Chef Robbie was one of the Marlick's very first customers, even before they established their business.
I think Vivek's is more comparable to Japan, especially later in the season when they do get bigger and the more orange comes out to it.
Robbie says frozen yuzu can't compare with the flavor of the fresh fruit.
This we can buy all year round, stays frozen. Similar flavor profile, but I'd say less floral notes, less freshness. And like I said, the juice tends to be like really punchy.
But for Japan's yuzu farmers, juicing is one of the only ways to access the US market. Yuzu juice can be imported from Japan because processing removes the pathogens, diseases, and pests that whole fruits carry. At the Japan Agricultural Cooperatives Processing Center, where Senkoji Farms and other producers juice their yuzu, 10 squeezing machines are kept behind glass.
皮として販売されます。きれいな皮はそのまま皮として活用されるために。
The skins are processed with a slicer.
この外の皮の部分は柚子の精油エッセンシャルオイルを取るための会社に販売されます。
Yuzu cocktails, sauces, and seasonings might feel trendy in the US, but the citrus goes back hundreds of years in Japan.
昔から私ども柚子の文化とともに育っているので、この柚子の文化を絶やさないように。
My favorite thing is the yuzu bath that in Japan you can take on winter solstice.
The cultural significance that exists in Japan doesn't exist over here.
According to Data Central's menu adoption cycle, yuzu is in the adoption stage, which is all about growing an ingredients fan base. And the world's zest for yuzu seems to be increasing. Monin, a French flavour company, has named yuzu the 2025 flavour of the year. Monin has a history of predicting trends and influencing menus around the world, and market segments like the yuzu-based sauce ponzu and yuzu essential oil are expected to grow. While it's safe to say it's a trend in the US, Flavors by Bhumi seems to be making a bet that yuzu is here to stay. The Marlicks are currently expanding their business to California.
We have close to about, I would say, another 10,000 trees in California of different varieties.
This way, the company can shorten the travel time and provide even fresher fruit to chefs on the West Coast.
We would love to process at some point in the future. Right now, we are just producing fresh fruit and supplying directly to our clients, and that's it.
The citrus has a way to go before ubiquity outside of Japan, but it seems to be a matter of time.
Yuzu greenhouse.
Shot 15. Action.
1, 2, 3, action. Take 20.
1, 2, 3. Action.